From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView Podcast.
All right, and welcome to this week's episode of the DuView Podcast. I'm your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and this week we have another solo episode coming at you guys. Episode 31 is a solo episode, like I just said, so we're going to be kicking it off, just me here in the studio. I'm going to, riff here and just kind of catch you guys up with what's been going on here over the last couple of weeks and over the summer. It's been pretty hectic, so I'll just catch you guys up on some personal stuff, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of today's episode, which is, as if you've looked at the card or any of the information about this episode, it's going to be on Maine's highest peak, Mount Katahdin. You go, Du, how are you going to do an episode on a mountain? It can't talk. You know, it may not have as much culture as a city or whatever, but we're in luck today, folks. Mount Katahdin is Maine's, as I said, Maine's highest peak, but it also has large history tied in with the native populations, as well as a lot of American history odds and entities, which you wouldn't think about. Former presidents have been there, and other things like that are just interesting. And again, it's Maine's highest mountain. It's also the end, or the terminus of the Appalachian Trail, which any of the AT folks out there have had to go up Mount Katahdin to finish the trail, or, you know, in the other way to start the, Mount Katahdin if you wanted to do it the other way around there, Appalachian Trail starting from the north and heading south. But that being said, just to catch you guys up on what's been going on with me, soccer, high school soccer is back in swing. We started preseason, in full swing rather, we started preseason soccer recently here, and ended up leading to an interesting development for yours truly. I ended up dislocating my left elbow at soccer practice, and you're going to say, how'd you manage that? Well, yeah, I guess here's the quick version of the story for you guys. So I was playing net at the end of the game in a little scrimmage, and just was shielding the ball to let it go out of bounds. I don't go that hard when I play in net. I didn't play as a goalie in high school, and nor am I that good of a goalie. I'm more or less just like a scarecrow standing there to not just let the ball go right in, because we were down one of our keepers wasn't there that day. But regardless, I was letting the ball go out of bounds. One of the little freshman kids thought he was going to be cute and sneak in there, ended up getting tripped up on me, and I was moving at pace to shield the ball out of bounds, and I'm a bigger dude. I may be short, but I'm stocky, and so I had a split decision to make when I was falling down. This kid is all of 4'10", 4'11", 75 pounds soaking wet, and I'm fully convinced if I had fallen on him, after getting tripped, I would have ended up hurting him. And so I had a split decision to make in that moment, fall off to the side and take whatever comes, or, hit the kid. And so I pushed myself off to the side as best I could as I was falling, and landed right on my left elbow, popped it right out, instantly knew there was going to be a problem. My whole left arm was all locked up. It was interesting, and this comes after playing rugby for, a few seasons and getting kicked around and banged around, but never dislocated anything. Like I said, ACL, yes, knee, yes, all that stuff, yes, but never a lot of arm stuff, especially like joints and elbows, which was real strange. Even the people at the hospital were like, whoa, we don't see a lot of elbow, dislocations here. But that being said, the real funny part of the story that I'll get to here in just a second is that once I finally got to the emergency room and got checked in, I was getting my x-rays done by the radiologist, and she goes, all right, this might be really painful, to preface, but I got to get another angle of your arm so we can see what's really going on, or your elbow in this situation. He goes, okay. And I go, okay, whatever. And I try to, turn my arm for as best I can. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to turn my arm. It's just so painful. I'm in excruciating pain at this point. And so she's doing her best to like move the arm. And then there's just this surge, this pulse that goes from my elbow up to my hand. And I just bellow out. It was one of the more painful things I had ever gone through, to be honest with you folks. In the moment, she had ended up resetting my elbow. So here I am getting my, x-rays done, and she accidentally, unintentionally resets my elbow. And so as I'm talking to you guys now, I am in a sling and a little bit of a cast type deal, or a splint type deal rather. It has that same, like rigid material there with the fuzzy stuff on it. But anyway, regardless, of that is that I'm just in the process of mending and healing. So it's been an interesting week. Still been able to go to soccer. Not been able to do much. Like I said, I'm an electrician, so you need two hands to work. And so hopefully, we'll be getting back to that. Like I said, I have another appointment with the specialist here pretty soon, so I'll figure out a little bit more what's going on. But yeah, I'm a one-armed man right now, and so dealing with that as it is. Like I said, I still have a not to preface to say that I have a great life. Don't get me wrong. No complaints there. But it does suck when you lose an arm or something like that temporarily. It's just a pain in the ass, to be completely honest with you folks. So that's what I've been dealing with recently. If things haven't been, the content hasn't quite been on top of things or whatever, if things have been a little lackluster recently, I'm going to go ahead and chalk it up to that. That's my excuse anyway. So, and it's been busy, guys. This summer, it goes without saying, regardless of if I'm coaching high school soccer or if I'm injuring myself, it's been a busy summer, as I talked about with my last episode with Lucas. We saw some really quality music shows and hope to see a couple more of those before the summer's out, catch up with some family and a few other things like that, family friends, and a few other things like that before the warm weather starts to leave us here. But that being said, guys, today's episode is really going to feature Mount Katahdin. This is actually going to be Mount Katahdin Part 1. This is going to be a two-part. I'm splitting it up. There is enough information, guys. Like I said, I'm very thorough when I do these types of episodes. If you haven't had an opportunity, if you're like, what type of episode is this going to be like, go check out my series on Augusta, Maine, the city of Augusta, Maine, just Part 1 and 2. That's a great, series to kind of lay out how I'm going to do this episode because it's really similar. We're going to start with the earliest recorded parts of history for this area, and we're going to work our way forward. And like I said, we're going to cover the older, ancient and colonial stuff today, and as well as some stuff into the 1800s. And then, like my other episode previously, we'll go ahead and just work in the 1900s, 20th century, 21st century stuff into the next episode in the more recent, newer times, because there's so much to dive through in just like the 1900s, 20th century alone that, like I said, it in fact does deserve its own episode. So like I said, I'm going to be kicking things off here in just a second. So like I said, we're going to talk about Maine's highest peak. It's super important to the state and that those that lived here previous to when Maine was a state, and also, to those of us now that Maine is a state. Mount Katahdin is a very important part of our state's geography, but also a part of our state's economy too, which I'll get into a little bit later. The information from this episode, as always, I'm not just coming up with this stuff. I do research, and there are some fine folks that have done a lot of research for me that I'm allowed or that I can pull from, just as long as obviously you credit your sources. So there's the A History of Mount Katahdin by Allison Quang. There's also an article from the Maine Encyclopedia, specifically the section on Mount Katahdin, and there's also some various sources from the Bangor Daily News by various writers and such. So that being said, going to go ahead and break into it now. Now we're going to be talking about here Mount Katahdin, Maine's highest peak. So as I said, Mount Katahdin is Maine's highest point. It's about 5,268 feet tall. It lies in Maine's Baxter State Park, which is located about 20 miles northwest of the town of Millinocket in Piscataquis County. This is located in the eastern central part of the state of Maine. This rugged mountain consists of a group of summits, of which the highest peak is Baxter Peak. Mount Katahdin is the northern terminus of the Appalachian National Scenic Trail, which extends southward to Georgia. The mountain's name is derived from the Abenaki Indian word meaning Maine Mountain. Maine being M-A-I-N, not M-A-I-N-E like the state. The famous writer Washington Irving described the Catskills Mountains as a dismembered branch of the great Appalachian family, swelling up to a noble height and lording it over the surrounding country. Every change of season, every change of weather, indeed, every hour of the day produces some change in the magical hues and shapes of these mountains. When the weather is fair and settled, they are clothed in blue and purple, and print their bold outlines on the clear evening sky. But sometimes, when the rest of the landscape is cloudless, they will gather a hood of gray vapors about their summits, which, in the last rays of the setting sun, will glow and light up like the crown of glory. So what Washington Irving's doing here is he's really describing and capturing the beautiful majesty of Mount Katahdin, and it truly is beautiful. I highly recommend, if you don't look at any of the photos I share in and surrounding this episode or related to this episode, looking up some of your own Mount Katahdin photos, because it is absolutely beautiful, and especially as he notes, at sunset. And this is obviously going to have an effect. The mountain has an effect on the weather around it just because of how big it is, and it really, like I said, is really imposing on the skyline. You can't drive through northern Maine without really seeing Mount Katahdin in some capacity. Heck, you can even stand in some spots down here in central Maine or central southern Maine and see Mount Katahdin. So it really has a huge place in the state, and it has a huge place in the state's history, including the first inhabitants of Maine, the Native Americans. And they really held Mount Katahdin in a really high regard for their culture. And I'll talk about that in just a second. They even have a whole native spirit, associated with the mountain. So I'll get into that and break down the story that we are given from the Penobscot Indians. They were the ones who really held in high regard the mountain and the power, and have strong points of Mount Katahdin in their own history and culture. So, as I said, Katahdin's deep, rich history begins with the Penobscot Indian tribe. The Penobscots noted the incredible altitude of the mountain, calling it Katahdin, which translates to the Great Mountain or the Main Mountain, depending on who you ask. For the Penobscot tribe, the mountain represented the beginning of life, a place of spiritual birth and enlightenment. The Penobscots made their living in the surrounding regions of the mountain, often hunting and fishing in harmony with the seasons. However, they cautioned against climbing to the mountain's summit. They believed that the evil spirit called Paloma resided there. Paloma, which translates to who curses the mountain, is frequently depicted as a gigantic bird-like creature with the head of a moose and is associated with the snow, cold weather, and storms. The Penobscots believed that if they summoned Katahdin, they would either be killed or devoured by Paloma. So to appease him, they would offer him periodic sacrifices of oil and fat, which obviously they collected from the animals that they hunted in their local habitat in and around the Mount Katahdin area. So, that being said, very little was known of the mountain summit of Katahdin by American and European surveyors, who would later, as I said, it's hard to miss the mountain, who would later, exploring more into the Maine wilderness, would find the mountain and set their sights on it. But prior to this, non-Native American populations, little was even known about the peak or its surrounding areas. It was very much left untouched, rather. And that being said, this would change, however. It wasn't until 1800 when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because again, Maine was part of Massachusetts at that time. We didn't become our own individual state until 1820. But like I said, in the early 1800s, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts commissioned Charles Turner Jr. to conduct a survey of the northeastern corner of the United States. And this is when Katahdin really came into focus. Turner hired 2 Native American guides to lead him and his expedition team of 10 men to the foot of the mountain. The guides, 2 Native American guides being, fearing the spirit of Paloma, refused to go all the way to the summit and issued several warnings to Turner. But Turner ignored them, and on August 13th, 1804, he and his men made the first recorded non-Native American ascent up the mountain. Turner believed Katahdin to be so great that he thought it reached 13,000 feet in elevation. Like I said, it's right around 5,000 feet. Like again, it's a very imposing, very, very, very large. And so, similar to if you're just driving by, similar to, Mr. Turner here coming up from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, seeing this, this major monolithic cathedral in the woods type structure, ascending up into the heavens, you'd be taken aback too. And so that's really the unique part about this mountain and the areas surrounding it. But prior to him, in 1764, actually a gentleman by the name of Joseph Chadwick, a surveyor, recorded the first non-native sighting of Mount Katahdin in a report of his explorations. Charles Turner Jr. and his party of 10, like I said, didn't make the climb until 1804, years later. So the mountain was known about, even prior to the American Revolution. But again, it's quite a distance. And as I kind of talked about with Benedict Arnold's march to Quebec City in the Augusta, Maine episode, the Maine wilderness is massive. Like, they didn't have a real grasp on how big things were and how, as the old adage goes, you can't get there from here. You really can't, especially back then when you're riding on horses and buggies. There are no roads. And so, again, travel to the state's interior is very difficult. That's why, again, this is a great, kind of teaching moment, too, for Maine's personal history, or I guess Massachusetts at this time, northern Massachusetts, because again, we're still operating prior to 1820 here in this time period. But that being said, you see a lot of the majority of Maine's population pop up around the coastline in areas like Augusta that have river, pathways right to the ocean, because it's all ease of access back in the old days, guys. How can I set up my homestead as quickly and easily as possible? It's not till we get, more industry. It's not till we develop and even really become our own, country, and after the Aroostook Wars, that area really starts to develop in the Great North Woods. And again, it's a really special area, but that being said, it's tough to get to. Like, if there was no Highway 95, the major, interstate highway that runs north-south to Maine, I don't really know how you'd get up there. It would be a hopping from one back road to another, I guess. Like I said, I'm sure there's still people living in Maine that could tell you about getting up to the county before the interstate. But again, it must not have been easy, and it must have really isolated a lot of people up there. Some people like it. And I mean, I even have, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in the next episode, my own dad, and if you go back to about a year ago, and a little over a year ago now, when I had him on last summer for an episode, he talked about working up in Millinocket, which is right next to Katahdin, and how difficult it was to get around. So, that was an issue that had plagued that area for a long time. And like I said, we see that here too. And that's why the area is left so really undisturbed. And that's why you have, such a strong native presence up there, which will obviously, change as we see when more Europeans and Americans, I guess in this capacity, start showing up in the northern parts of the state. There would be more expeditions and surveys into the Maine woods as well. The second that would come into contact with this area would be in 1819, and the third would be a year later in 1820. These were surveys done by the Maine Boundary Commission. They were just simply seeking to clarify the border with Canada. And during one of these, another geological survey, Maine state geologist Charles T. Jackson ascended Katahdin in 1837. Jackson, like Turner, and later on, author Henry David Thoreau, would try to summit the mountain, also all guided by Native American guides, by Penobscot Indian guides. As I mentioned, Henry David Thoreau tried to climb the mountain. He did this a little bit later on in 1846, and he never actually reached the top. But as I, have kind of been alluding to, is that people have become infatuated, or I've said directly, people have become infatuated with the mountain Katahdin, and a big reason for that is because of Thoreau's book, or a chapter in his book rather, that talks all about Katahdin. The book being called "The Maine Woods." It's a very, very interesting read. I read excerpts of it getting ready for this episode, and it's quite fascinating. And so that being said, as Mr. Thoreau, as Charles Jackson, as Mr. Turner as well from Massachusetts, they all became infatuated with the mountain, the legacy behind it. It was a very mysterious and very, very interesting place, situated up in the middle of the rurality of the Maine woods. So that being said, Henry David Thoreau did not make it to the top, but again, he did help popularize the mountain and access to the mountain. And later on, a young Theodore Roosevelt would climb the mountain in 1878 with his guide, Bill Sewall. The Appalachian Mountain Club later on would establish its first camp there in 1877, and its second at Chimney Pond in 1916, and a third at Kidney Pond in 1925. Another unique thing, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the makeup of the mountain real briefly. There are a couple ponds as you go up. The most famous being, the Chimney Pond area, and there's a couple, ponds going up the mountain. And so you have a very unique and different spread of geography, being big, mountainous, rocky boulder trails, more steeper, narrow trails like the Knife's Edge. And I'll get into all the different types of trails in the episode where we talk more about Baxter State Park in a couple weeks. But that being said, this when you think about mountaineering in 1800, it's not the same as going hiking now. There are, in a lot of ways, no trails. You have literal guides who have grown up on this territory for years and years. And like I said, your first, logging camp, hunting camps are starting to really get carved out into the Maine woods in the 1870s. So that being said, we literally had Teddy Roosevelt loved the state of Maine. His family sent him up here to, he was people don't know this a lot about TR, but he was a really sickly kid. He grew up in New York State, New York City, and he was just really a sickly kid. For as much of a badass as he turned into as a young man and president, he was not very good health, and so he came up to the Maine woods, and they figured that the nice, clean Maine air would really help his health issues, and it did in a lot of ways. But it also helped him just develop a real love for the outdoors, hiking, and just really the state of Maine itself. There are some great photographs out there of young Teddy Roosevelt holding like a lever-action Winchester rifle with snowshoes on his back, going out into the Maine woods to go hunting during the winter. And that was happening a lot of the times, like Island Falls, Millinocket, and the surrounding areas around Mount Katahdin, being the real draw. And like I said, Teddy Roosevelt even climbed the mountain back in the 1870s. And so, like I said, you see the area start to develop as we get into the 1800s more. Like I said, we knew the mountain was there. We now wanted to make use of it, or people were drawn to it. Like I said, the infatuation of Mount Katahdin had kicked off, here and just going forward. So that being said, the area would also be visited by several governors of our state of Maine. Or would-be governors who made the trek in some capacity. Percival P. Baxter visited in 1920, followed by Ralph O. Brewster, in 1925. Turner, Jackson, and Thoreau, among others, found the west branch of the Penobscot River the best approach, leading to the Able Stream and the treeless Able Slide, which now hosts the Able Trail. And so, like I said just a couple seconds ago, mountaineering was not the same in the 1870s. It was much harder to get to these places, so you really had to kind of know what you were doing and have people that knew how to get there. And actually, fun fact, I've actually canoed a good portion of the west branch of the Penobscot River. To be exact with you, 50 miles of it when I was a Boy Scout. We did the 50-mile canoe trip on the west branch of the Penobscot. You can check out my Maine summer activities episode from about a year ago now if you want to hear more about that trip, because that gets a little bit off topic here. But the fact of the matter being is that even now, these are not the most accessible areas, and so they had to paddle in on a boat, park, and then walking, to the trailhead from there, or whatever trail was made from there. Much of the mountain below the tree line and the surrounding area of the land is now Baxter State Park. However, we're going to see the area was heavily logged in the 19th and early 20th centuries. So that affected the area, but also the specific trail that these gentlemen, the Able Slide Trail, or the Able Trail, while steep, is a relatively short and direct route to the tablelands, which is, speaking on the geography of the mountain, is a very unique area where you get up a good altitude of the mountain, probably 3/4 of the way plus up, and then it just flattens out. You just walk over these flat surfaces with big old boulders. It's like, again, this is a glacier mountain. These all came about with the movement of the glaciers in prehistoric times. So that being said, a lot of these just rocks were deposited here. The Appalachians and Katahdin on the whole are very older mountains, or a lot of older mountains, and so you have these large changes in geography, unlike the Rocky Mountains out west, which are much more pointed. Don't get me wrong, Katahdin is still pretty pointy for as far as Maine goes, but it does round out on top, like all the Appalachian mountains really kind of do in some capacity. As I said, we lost a lot of trees and forestation in the area, but again, this would all come to change with the creation of Baxter State Park. And so I just want to emphasize again quickly the emphasis on the area of Katahdin to the Native Americans, and just kind of wrap things up what we talked about in this episode today before moving on to the newer or more recent stuff. In doing my research for this episode, I really noted in the authors I read, they really noted the native significance. So I really wanted to go over that again and highlight that. And so again, the history of Katahdin dictates several essential lessons to its visitors. The belief that the Penobscots emphasize the importance of respecting the entire mountain, not just the summit, all of which is sacred land. And the popular tales of Paloma remind the hikers to be cautious of fickle weather conditions and as well as the severe storms. Today, Paloma's name is remembered on Paloma Peak at a summit of Katahdin, and the Penobscots continue to live on the Penobscot Indian Island Reservation in northern Maine. They frequently return to Katahdin for spiritual purposes, however. The next 100 years would be full of change for the mountain and the surrounding areas. The area was visited by, as I said, future American presidents, would soon become the organization or the main focus of a state park. we would have a very famous boy get lost on a mountain in Maine. The effects of the economics in the area and the changing of the town of Millinocket in the 20th century. And as I said, specifically to Katahdin here, guys, our story will continue into next week's episode, Mount Katahdin Part 2. Again, I just really wanted to lay out the significance of the Penobscot Indian culture, as well as, the early Americans or Europeans that would come over and, inhabitate the area too. So I just wanted to, break things up this summer, guys. I know folks have a lot going on this summer with other stuff, so I just wanted to break things up and do a couple shorter episodes, because the last couple episodes with guests have been real doozies. Don't get me wrong. I've loved every minute of it, but it's been a lot of talking, and so I just wanted to, slow things down a little bit, change the pace a little bit here, and really just kind of focus on the beauty of the state of Maine in 2 episodes. So just a little bit shorter format here, guys. We'll be back at it in another 4 or so weeks with another guest. But expect next episode, guys, Mount Katahdin Part 2. We're going to talk about Baxter State Park and its formation with Governor Baxter. We're also going to talk about, as I mentioned just previously, the boy who gets lost, the famous Lost on a Mountain in Maine story. We'll talk about the end of the logging drives and how that affected the area. And we'll kind of talk about the greater Millinocket today in a certain Millinocket, Aroostook County, Piscataquis County, as it is today. What are the state of things? Where are things at? Are people still? I mean, no secret, people still enjoying the mountain. As I said, guys, the infatuation with Mount Katahdin has not gone away. It started way back in the 1800s, 1700s, and has only gone from there, at least for us white folk. Not to include the thousands or hundreds at least years of significance and infatuation in Native culture too. Like I said, I'm not. I have Native American family, but I am by no means an expert. I really should have on a Maine Native American, Abenaki, Penobscot expert sometime to really go over a lot of this stuff and clarify a lot of stuff. Because like I said, I know enough to get in trouble, guys. But like I said, if I screw something up or if I goof, like I said, I am by no means an expert. I am a very research student of history. Like I said, I have a couple minors in the history field from college. But that being said, I'm not a professional historian, and I'm doing this on the side with research on top of working a full-time job, and I guess now a dislocated elbow. So I do the best I can with these guys. If you find any holes in my research, or if you want to give some constructive criticism for this episode or this style of episode, please do. Love to hear it. One big ask, guys, if you could. One big, huge ask. Leave a review on any of the podcast platforms, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or any of those where you actually stream the episodes from, or also too on our Facebook page. If you could leave us a review, that would be awesome, guys. It's just it's hard getting content out there when the algorithm is fighting you. So that being said, it's difficult for smaller content creators like myself to really get our stuff out there. And like I said, I'm biased, but I think I put out a pretty good product, all things considering. We're balling on a budget here in the basement studio. So that being said, if you guys, any of you dedicated folks, could really just leave a review, that would be that's my biggest ask here, guys. It just, like I said, it helps me so much. And like I said, I really want to take this thing to the next level here pretty soon and transform it. I really want to talk to you guys too about my plans. I'd like to redo the podcast studio. Right now I just have a table and some chairs. I'd like to make it a little bit more comfortable. I got a couple of locks on some couches and some other more comfortable chairs. Just really make the podcast a little bit more comfortable. I mean, it will still be the same type of quality episodes, but I'm just trying to we've been here a year, guys. A little bit of quality life update. And like I said, I really, to be honest with you guys, I'm working on updating my technology. Just things have been so crazy. I mean, I ended up with COVID a couple weeks ago. I've dislocated my elbow. It's been July and early August were a hell of a couple months, guys. So I'm just getting my feet back underneath me right now, to be completely honest with you guys, and just kind of working things out. I'm also going back to school. I'm starting at KVCC here with my electrical stuff here, pretty soon. So I'm a busy dude. I got a lot on my plate, to be completely honest with you guys, and so I'm gonna continue to try and put out the best content I can, the best whatever, whether it be shorter episodes or whatever. But like I said, I'd really like to incorporate video into this battle area at some point, so you can see me, especially see the people who I have on. That's the real thing. They're the cool people. Like I said, I'm just here facilitating the talk. The people who I have on are really what make this thing special, and also the place where I happen to host the podcast from, Augusta, Maine, and an extension to Maine itself. Cool places. Again, I'll go toe-to-toe with you and explain to you why the state of Maine is great and why an extension in Augusta is great. Like I said, there's poverty, there's homelessness. Well, yeah, you know what, though, and again, not to get off on another tangent, but if we work together, we can make these places better. It just requires people to actually want to work together instead of working separately. So anyway, that being said, guys, there was Mount Katahdin Part 1. I won't get too far into a tirade on that, but Mount Katahdin Part 1, guys, if you could, like I said, leave a review for us. 5 stars would be awesome. 4 stars is cool, too. But on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our Facebook page, the DuView Podcast, everywhere, DuView207 on Instagram, guys. I greatly appreciate all of you listening in. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And for all of you who continue to share my content and stuff like that, guys, we're at the point in the game, guys, where it's just getting the word out that I'm doing what I'm doing, if that makes sense. That's the point I'm really at, guys. The quality of content is there. The backlog of information and content is there. I've got 30-plus episodes out now. It's just getting people to, hear about it, and getting bigger profile guests, too, eventually. Don't get me wrong. I'm still going to have people who you've never heard of, my friends and my former educators and stuff like that. I'm still going to have those people on without a doubt because those are the really cool people as far as I'm concerned. But like I said, I don't know everybody. If someone knows like a Maine cabin master out there or somebody like that, drop me a line. Love to have them on, or somebody who's anybody knows anybody that's a little bit more prominent in like the Portland music scene, like Ghost of Paul Revere and those guys. Like I said, drop a line, help your boy do out. Like I said, I know a lot of people, but I don't know everybody. So like I said, leave a review, tell me what you think, and just keep sharing, just keep listening, just keep helping me get stuff out, guys. Because like I said, I'm only one dude, and it requires you, the listeners, you, the fans, you, the friends and family, you, the confidants, to help me get this stuff out. So not to put a little bit on you guys, but I guess I am a little bit in that capacity. So regardless, thank you for those who continue to help me out and help me keep the lights on, so to speak, here. So that being said, guys, thank you for tuning into this episode. I'll be back in a couple weeks with Mount Katahdin Part 2, and hope you guys enjoyed a little break from the longer form episode and just to hear from me this week. So enjoy that, and like I said, we'll be back in a couple weeks with an all-new episode. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a good rest of your summer.